This is Tara McGinnis, and this is Theatrical Makeup Design Interactive. Today, we're doing animal makeup. Animal makeup, you sometimes need to do for children's theater, but most often, I regard this as mainly an exercise in using the skills that you have been learning for doing character makeup, of how to go and alter the shape of your features to match that of a person with a different skull shape than yourself. Now, the reason that animal makeup is really useful as a practice for this is animals have completely different skull shapes. So, when you're going to go and do an animal makeup, you're going to be trying to give the impression that you have a radically different skull shape. Plus, usually you'll also be putting on the markings of whatever fur or feathers that particular animal has. Now, the best ones to do for this exercise are flat-faced animals, ones that don't have that much of a long snout. You can do ones like dogs and so on that have long snouts, but since you're primarily doing this for practice, if you're trying to simply learn how to move those features about, and you want to pick something that is much more difficult than simply doing human alterations on your face, but not so difficult that you are really, really having trouble making the change, starting with an idea for a flat-faced animal is good. Flat-faced animals include cats, pug dogs, lemurs, tarsiers, apes, monkeys. Pretty much those are the most popular ones to go and do because they all have a little bit less long of a snout than most other animals. And the apes and monkeys are, actually related to us, so the differences are relatively small. It is, however, much bigger of a change than you'd be doing if you were doing simply another sort of person. So it's kind of like doing push-ups in makeup. You're doing this as an exercise to practice moving those bones about, and yet not moving them about so much that you're simply painting a design of this is a dog, this is a cat, this is a whatever on your face, and having it that the moment you try and move your face, it won't move in the right way. You need to somehow make the mouth coincide with your mouth. You somehow need to make your eyes coincide with the eyes. And you have to go and account for or hide whatever you're doing for your nose. So if you want to go and do this makeup, you're going to have to figure out how your face can be adapted to look more like these alternate skull-shaped animals without going and moving things so radically that, yes, we have a perfectly shaped and proportioned eye, but it happens to be in the middle of the forehead. Or, yes, the mouth on this kind of animal is at the very end of their face, so I'm going to put the mouth here. Of course, there's going to be this little problem of the fact that the mouth that I'm talking with is going to be up here. So you want to go and use this mainly as an exercise. It is, however, also useful if you're doing different kinds of children's theater and other sorts of non-realistic theater that have humans playing animals. Now, another skill that it goes and gives you practice at is going and laying out a makeup plan that doesn't involve putting down a base and putting on simply highlight and shadow, but where you have to go and plan by doing a rendering ahead of time where sections of color are going to be on your face. This is the sort of thing you end up having to do for clown makeup and a lot of other not so realistic styles of makeup. So, for instance, for this Shoelace the Cat makeup, I'm going to go and do a set of outlines on my face to go and use as guides for a kind of color by number thing that it's going to happen on my face. Now, what I'm doing here Certain makeups, you can go and put down a base first if the animal has predominantly one color on its face and just small amounts of color by number sections. But if, like Shoelace the tabby, she has a lot of different colors going on all over the face, and it's going to actually be simpler if I simply put in the outlines and then fill in each of those sections with their highly contrasting colors. That way I don't get a sort of muddy thing happening on my face. So I'm putting in the outlines, and one of the things I'm wanting to do is I want to widen the nose, because cats have wider, flatter noses than humans. And a household cat has been crossbred for generations to have much larger eyes than wild varieties of cats. They've been crossbred this way by humans who think large-eyed creatures look like human babies and are cute. So, baby cats, when they were being domesticated, the ones that had the biggest eyes were considered cutest and got saved. And those that were not considered cutest did not get saved. And so, over many generations, household cats have acquired very, very big eyes. Now, what I'm doing here is I want to get large eyes. I want to, however, have them move in a way that makes use of the way my own face moves. So the shape of the eyes, I'm actually altering a little bit so that it follows the lines of the eyebrow, so that when that eyebrow is difficult to get rid of, it will conveniently be in the middle of a dark shadow anyway, won't show up. And the bottom part of the eye is at the bottom part of this bag, the section of my face that moves, so that when I want to move the eyes of the cat and make things happen, they will follow along with those muscles in my face. Other things I'm going to want to do. Now, a cat, in addition to having a flatter nose, has a rather longer nose in proportion on its face than a human. So I'm going to go and make the tip of the nose go down here. And lay that out. Cats have extremely narrow lips. In fact, on a lot of cats, you won't even see the fact that they have them, because their fur is sufficient to conceal it. But very wide ones. And in the case of Shoelace, hers went up at the corners, at least most of the time. She's a cat who smiled. And goes there. Another thing that's different is cats, almost as soon as they have their mouth, just below that, just a little below their lower lip, their face ends. So this chin doesn't exist on a cat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and make a mark of where Shoelace's chin would end, like here. And when it comes to putting in shadow, I'm going to put in a lot of shadow under that area so that visually from a distance, this chin will recede in apparent, it won't seem to be sticking out so much. It'll sort of go in. Now, there's also a section up here, and here, As you can see, I'm not doing these lines very hard. I'm just doing enough so that I can see where the blocks of color go. This kind of pre-planning makes it a little bit simpler when putting in something as complicated as this kind of a makeup. These are just sort of rough guides. Oh, that's not bilaterally symmetrical. Let's make it more so. There. So this is just the basic outline for what I want to get for her face. Now, tabby cats, in addition to having their features be somewhat different because of the skull shape, they also have a complicated fur pattern on their face. One of the reasons I've chosen Shoelace's tabby cat patterns is something I've noticed about cat faces. People sometimes talk about cats not having very expressive faces. And I think perhaps that the people who think that have cats with solid color faces. Because in our house, we have had Shoelace, who had these very kabuki-like markings on her face as a tabby, and Moo, who is a Siamese cat, which has a sort of black snout fading to dark brown up here. What this did on Moo is it goes and seems to flatten her face out and makes it that you can almost not read any of her expressions except when she's under very bright light or you're very, very close to her. Shoelace, on the other hand, with all these little stripes along all the lines of the muscles of her face, every time she would flicker an eyelid from across the room, you could go and tell what she was thinking and feeling. All her little expressions were very easy to read. And it's interesting that if you take household cats, any weird combination of household cats, and they're set all off in a corner and become feral cats and intermarry, the dominant genes that end up after many generations are versions of tabby cat genes that have these stripes. Apparently, among cats, particularly when they're out in semi-wild situations like feral cats have, their social structure depends tremendously on their facial expressions. Their facial muscles, actually, they have more facial muscles than we do, which indicates that it's pretty important for them. So when you've got rural colonies of these, they go toward the tabby genes that have these very expressive looking faces where they can go and telegraph their emotions from a distance. However, we've bred separate species of cat that have solid color faces because we find them pretty, but the result is that we can't actually read their expressions as well. Why this is important in a makeup class is because of these kinds of tabby markings, you can amplify expression. You know this from the way that it works on the cats. And that's exactly what you do when you're putting on a extreme old age makeup or a stylized makeup or a kabuki makeup that uses these strong stripes and things in it, these very extreme highlights and shadows, because they help you telegraph emotion at a distance, the same way it does for a cat. So, I'm going to go and put on fur pattern. Now, what's interesting about Shoelace is if I were to be completely literal about her fur color was in actual fact a sort of pale, creamy yellow, just a little bit more yellow than a human white person's skin tone, and black. But what's interesting is if you look at photographs of her, that gave off the impression actually of being brown, because the black and the yellow together ended up looking more like this in spots. So I'm actually going to use brown in parts of the makeup on this face, even though the actual fur is this black and yellow. I'll use black as the strongest parts and yellow in there as well, but the dominant color is actually going to be brown because I'm going to be trying to simplify the makeup in order to make it read on stage as brown. So, first step, I'm going to put the light colors in. which are the yellows. Some of the yellows fade out in her face to actual whites. So I'm putting in the yellow, and in the places where it gets lightest, I'm going to put white over that as a highlighter. So first, sort of tan yellow sections. In general, it helps to go and start off using your lighter colors and then putting darker colors on them later. The reason for that is your dark colors have a much easier time messing about and getting into your light colors if you do the dark ones first, whereas the light colors usually don't cause quite as much havoc on the dark colors. So that's the yellow sections. Now, I'm going to mix white into those sections using short hair-like strokes. This will help to suggest fur. Depending on the size of the theater, this is something you'd probably want to do in a mid-sized theater where little bits of these brush strokes would work. If, however, you're dealing with a very large one, you actually want to do more like that, where you're just making a highlight and a shadow and simplifying it down to a little bit more color by number look. But I'm going to show the furry way. Notice that I'm trying to make the direction of the strokes follow the logical direction that fur would go. Someplace else that I want to make a particular point of putting in highlighter, even if you were dealing with a cat that didn't have a fur pattern that had light spots here, you'd want to go and put some lighter color in here to go and make these areas that are sunken in on a human face seem to come out and flatten out as they would be on a cat face. That's most of the highlight areas. An intriguing bit on the tip of my particular cat's nose is she had a slightly pink nose. What's useful about this is, of course, a human nose sticks out in the way that a cat's nose does not. It sort of flattens out. And fortunately, her pattern included this slightly pink nose with a little bit of a dark center, which is like reverse. It's shadowing an area that would normally have a highlight, which tends to flatten out the appearance of the nose. Finally, under here, has sort of rosy pink. The next color I'm going to work on is brown. As I said, she didn't really have brown fur, though you'd think she did if you were looking at it not too carefully. So I'm going to put brown in fairly thinly in the sections that are in fact mostly black with little bits of yellow fur. In reality, it would be a whole series of pale yellow and black strokes. But the truth is, if you did that, you'd just end up with a mess on your face. You wouldn't actually get something that looked like the way she looks. So, you're going to go and the sort of chocolate color. And now I'm pretty well blocking out the chin using a dark color. I highly recommend, if you are a costume designer, that if you're having somebody do this kind of an animal, like a cat, and they're going to be using something that is this kind of a makeup color, you want to make it as little necessary to put this stuff on somebody's neck as you can, because whatever it is that they've got is going to get all over the costume. And a good trick, and one that you'll see in a fair number of the costumes in the musical Cats, is what they'll do is they'll have a washable thing up to here, and then they'll have a little section here that's made out of something like ostrich feathers, so that it suggests fur, but it's a simple little piece that can come off. And so if it gets scrunched up and can't be washed or whatever, it's easily removable. So you want to go and have something here that makes it so you're not having to put a ton of makeup on and then stick it into a costume, at which point all that stuff is going to come off onto the makeup, onto the costume. So ideally you want to go and find something that you can put around here on an animal costume that is either easy to wash or which is something that's easily disposable, like a little set of feathers or some such thing that's not too costly. Now, when you have a makeup like this, and you get an itch, you're pretty much having to use either a tiny bit of Pocaine. I really itch right here for some reason. This is not something you want to do a lot of messing about with your face. Now, I've got most of the major areas blocked in. As I say, the real color that's there is a lot of black and a little bit of tan. So I'm now going to put in the black in those spots so that I can get the fur pattern to show up. I'll put the black in those parts where it's most obvious that it is black when you look at the face of the cat. As I say, Shoelace did have visible lips. Not very big ones, little tiny cat lips like usual, but they were pigmented black. And turned up the corners. Actually going to go a little extra dark in that section. Then, where I'm trying to make the chin disappear, I run a line, so the chin has disappeared. This is just the bottom of the chin. And then run the black down. And fur-like strokes below that. Making sure that I get extra black on this area that's protruding out the chin. And then blending that up with the black up here. here on the forehead, there are sections where the black and tan mix has parts that are very, very black indeed. So those ones I'll put in here like strokes. And here, and here. So now I've got most of the fur going. I'm going to go and put a little more on the sides of the nose. And then start to work on the eyes. Make the nostrils and a little triangular shape of a kitty nose, which curiously looks as though it's outlined in paint on the cat's face. It's very precise. And the very tip of the nose on her, as I say, is a sort of rosy brown. But because my nose sticks out a bit too much, I'm going to actually put in a little of the black on the tip to try and reverse shadow that. I don't want to do too much or I'll lose the rosiness, but if I put a little bit of this black in, I will go and get it to flatten the nose out a bit. Like that. Now, the cat's eyes, as I say, very large in proportion to the size of their face. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint all of this as though it's the eye. So this is all going to become green. And in the center of the eye, where she has the cat-shaped, oval thing in the middle that's black, the iris, I'm going to use the fact that I have dark-colored eyes to sort of blend in and become part of that iris. So, first thing I do is I do the outline on the eyes, making sure that that outline coincides where my eyebrow is, to both help cover the eyebrow and to make it so that where I have the muscle that makes the eyebrow go up and down, I now have the ability to go and move the artificial cat eye. Look. There's this lovely thing in Tabby makeup. Tabby makeup, I'm even calling it. Tabby markings that look like Egyptian eye makeup. And I can't help but wonder if the Egyptians picked it up from cats, because they thought cats were keen. In fact, they thought cats were so keen that a beloved cat in an ancient Egyptian household might get mummified and the usual mourning rituals as if for a person, and the members of the family would shave off their eyebrows in mourning for their deceased kitties. Now, I'm going to put in the black iris. Now, the iris I can go and line up with my eyeball, my own iris, in fact. So from a distance, this dark color will tend to blend into that and it'll become a single extra large eye hole, aperture, which you will. Now, the last little bit is going to be putting in the green of her eyes. Now, in this case, I've got a water-based green. I'm going to put it in around spots. Okay, now I've got the green in. Now, while at this point the makeup looks like it's pretty close to done, and indeed if I want to freak you out, I will do this, and it will really look strange. This isn't done, because while this green is absolutely lovely when you're viewing it this big up close, when you get it under lights at a safe distance, that actually is, this color of green is too close to the black, and it will all just form into some big mushy thing. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to take my highlighter and paint a little highlight between the green and the black. Now this illustrates something that you'll find is true anytime you're dealing with fairly extreme color combinations. That very often if you've got something that is too close in the tone, the only way to make the edges clear is to go and stick either, if you've got two light tones that are really close together, you need to go and put a darker line between them if you want to go and differentiate them. And if you've got two fairly dark tones, as I do here, that are close together, you have to put a lighter tone, simply to separate the two visually. For final things that you could do for this, it's quite fun to go and take bits of fishing line and cut them short and stick them on as whiskers. That, however, really is only good if you're dealing with a small to medium-sized house for this. Obviously, you're not intending this as realism. Realism and doing cute animal makeup have nothing to do with one another. There's just nothing particularly realistic about having talking kitty beasts. So what you're going to be doing is, if you use those kinds of whiskers, you're doing that in a small theater, but you're doing it for non-realistic purposes. If, however, you're working in a really large theater, you don't necessarily have to go and do that. Much as we did with the eyelashes in the drag section, you can go and do little dots. Such as are shown where the whiskers are located. And if you are dealing with a big theater, you may also want to simply paint on some whiskers. You want to paint on, however, very few of them. Otherwise, you will end up putting too much darkness in there. So, for instance, I'll do 3 on one side and 5 on the other, just to give it a little asymmetrical look. And that's as much as you're actually going to want to do. The thing that will make an animal costume work, of course, is to not just have the cool makeup, but how you go and build the rest of it. And bearing in mind that you aren't dealing with realism when you're dealing with animal makeup, you're usually not trying to have something that looks so much like a cat, since humans don't, and very little cat stuff can be made to do so. So you're wanting something that's a stylized version of a cat. So it may be a cat in a tailcoat, or a cat in a top hat, or the cat in the hat. This is, however, mainly done as an exercise in going and moving your features around. And I will give some visual examples of how this works. By going and moving the edge of the eye up here, but keeping it in line with my eyebrows now. Anything I do with my eyebrows or scrunching up my eyes because of the line underneath there, because I've put them to coincide with lines that actually exist on my face, they become more mobile and I can express with them even though I've got this ton of paint on my face. Same thing with putting the nose. I've lowered it down, but I've still put the nostrils in where my nostrils are. And sure enough, this means I can go and do that sort of thing. Same thing with the mouth. Yes, a cat's mouth is closer to the bottom of the chin, but if you paint the cat's mouth here and simply do the line that goes between the nose and mouth to there, then the moment you open your mouth, you have a mouth painted down here and a mouth going here, as compared to, hi! Are you going to let me go out? Huh? 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 I know that sounds more dog-like, but that's definitely how the cat thought. Bird, bird, bird. Actually, they make little noises like, which I believe in cat means small bird would taste good for lunch. As you can see, they're predators. They have eyes on the front of your face. Almost all of the animals that you're going to want to go and do will be flat-faced animals with eyes on the front of their face, so you are talking about ones that are usually predators. One of the fun things is, inevitably when people do this as practice in class, they'll go and decide that they want to do a wolf. It's because, wolves are kind of cool and so on. They have this nice long snout, except we don't. So how do you make the snout work? You can get it to work. It's much, much more difficult. This is basically just trying to get you to do your push-ups for moving those features and remembering that if you can go and make portions of those features follow in with your own features, you amplify your expression instead of dampening it down using this sort of thing. This also shows what I was saying about the tabby cat markings are something that really give a major ability to amplify expression. And tabby cat markings are very close to what you have for kabuki makeup and a lot of other stylized makeups that exist, like clown makeup and Chinese opera makeup. They have a lot of the same features. And the reason that those stylized makeups exist is because they do the same thing that having tabby markings does for cats in the wild, where they're needing to go and express their intentions from a safe distance to one another. So. Now, I need to remember the name of this thing. This is... Hello, my name is Tabby. This is... Theatrical Makeup Design Interactive. Okay. I will get that eventually. Hello, my name is Tara McGinnis, and this is Theatrical... Screw it up every time. I've got to write this down. This is Tara McGinnis, and this is... I can't remember. This is Tara McGinnis, and this... I forgot it again. This is Tara McGinnis, and this is Theatrical Makeup Design Interactive. Hello, this is Tara McGinnis, and this is Theatrical Makeup Design Interactive. I've seen a cat without a grin before, but never a grin without a cat. We're all mad here. I'm mad. You're mad. How do you know that I'm mad? You're here, aren't you? This is Tara McGinnis, and this is Theatrical Makeup Design Interactive.